Hey everybody, today's objectives are to identify the parts of the photosynthesis equation, identify the scientists that came up with the photosynthesis equation, and identify the goals of the light-dependent and light-independent reactions. Let's take a look at the photosynthesis equation. It states that 6 carbon dioxide molecules with 6 water molecules plus light equals a high energy sugar, which is C6H12O6, which is glucose, plus 6 oxygen molecules. If you take a look at the picture, it just states the same thing. You need carbon dioxide and you need water plus energy, and what we get out of that is oxygen being released and a glucose being formed. There were 3 scientists who kind of helped formulate the photosynthesis equation. We're going to take a look at each one of their experiments and what they concluded. The first one is Van Helmont's experiment. What he did is he weighed a sapling, which is a small tree. Then he planted it in a pot with soil. He watered this tree for 5 years and monitored the growth. And at the end of his experiment, he took the tree out of the pot and exposed all the roots, so all the soil was away from the roots, and he weighed it again. He concluded that a plant's mass came from the water. His experiment accounts for the water portion of the photosynthesis equation. Next up is scientist Joseph Priestley. He used a jar candle, a flame, and a mint leaf to prove that plants give off oxygen. If we take a look down here, we have a candle inside of a jar, and he lit the candle, and after a short time the candle went out. In the second experiment that he did, he put a mint plant in with the candle and he lit it, and the candle continued to burn after several days. Once again, Joseph Priestley concluded that plants gave off oxygen. He knew that oxygen keeps a flame or a fire alive, and that the oxygen came from the mint leaf. So he was able to conclude that plants give off oxygen. Next up is Ingenhousz. His experiment, what he did is he took Priestley's experiment and added another piece to it. And what he did is he had the mint leaf plant with the candle, and after 7 days it was still burning. So what he did is he didn't give the mint leaf plant any sunlight, and he found out after 7 days that the plant went out. So what he did is he concluded that light is necessary for a plant to produce oxygen, which is another part of the photosynthesis equation. So let's revisit the photosynthesis equation. 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 6 water molecules and light will give us a high energy sugar called glucose, and it will give off oxygen. So if we put all 3 scientists together, their conclusions basically say that in the presence of light, plants transform carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates, and they also release oxygen. Alright, let's take a look at photosynthesis. Remember, we're looking at a chloroplast. There are 2 different stages. We have the light-dependent reactions, which take place inside of the thylakoid membrane. So if we take a thylakoid, there's a membrane that goes around it. That's where this reaction takes place. It does need sunlight. Remember, it does need sunlight in order for it to work. The second stage is the Calvin cycle, which is also known as the light-independent stage. This stage does not need sunlight to work. So half of the process needs light and will happen during the daytime, but the other half of the process will happen when light is not around, so during the nighttime per se, and that is the Calvin cycle. Let's take a closer look at the light-dependent reaction, which takes place in the thylakoid membrane. The overall purpose of the light-independent reaction is to convert light energy into chemical energy. The 2 types of chemical energy that we're trying to get out of this are ATP and NADPH. So I'll give you a short overview on what actually happens in the thylakoid membrane during the light-dependent reaction. First off, out of the photosynthetic equation, we are going to use light and water, and we're going to give off oxygen. So these are the parts that we're using in the light-dependent reaction. So what's going to happen is inside of the thylakoid, the system is going to use water, which is H2O. And what it's going to do is it's going to break both of the hydrogens off of the water to form hydrogen ions, which we'll use in this process. Here we have electrons. The electrons inside of the photosystem too will get excited by light, and that energy will give it enough energy to go down the electron transport chain, which it will go in and out of a bunch of proteins until it reaches photosystem 1, where more light will shine in, get trapped, and that energy is going to recharge the electrons, and it's going to shoot this electron down more proteins. And as it does that, it's going to get to an electron carrier called NADP positive, if we look here. And that NADP plus is going to want to have a hydrogen attached to it. So the energy that this electron gives off is going to allow the bonding of NAD plus with this hydrogen to make NADPH, which is one of the two forms of energy that we need. The other one's going to take place further down the electron transport chain, and it involves a protein called ATP synthase. And what this does is, this protein right here is like a turbine. It spins around, and as it spins around, it's going to suck these hydrogen ions through this protein. Alright, and when it gets shot through, it's going to create enough energy for ADP to combine with another phosphate to make ATP, which is our second type of chemical energy. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at the photosynthesis equation, and I want to tie it into how it's being used in the light-dependent reaction. As I said on the previous slide, that we have 6 water molecules being inserted into this reaction, and those 6 water molecules are going to be broken down into a bunch of oxygens and hydrogens. So when water gets broken down, the oxygens are going to be released as oxygen gas into the air, and this is what we breathe. But the hydrogens are going to be used to make chemical energy, as well as sunlight. Sunlight is entering into photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, and the hydrogens from the H2O are going to be used to make NADP plus and turn it into NADPH, and that H is one of the hydrogens off of the water. On the other side, the hydrogens are going to be used to get sucked through the ATP synthase, which is going to give ADP enough energy to bond with another phosphate to make ATP. So that is where the other hydrogens are going to go, and that's where we get our second form of chemical energy, which is ATP. So far, using the light-dependent reaction, we have shown how water, sunlight, and oxygen is used in the photosynthetic equation. So now we're going to take a look at the light-independent reaction. This is the Calvin cycle, and it's found in the stroma, which is in the chloroplast, but between the granum stacks, or the thylakoid stacks. Alright, so we have used water and oxygen and sunlight, and we explained how they fit into photosynthesis. The remaining two are found in the light-independent reaction, and that's carbon dioxide, and that's a high-energy sugar. So the goal of this reaction is to produce a high-energy sugar, which is glucose. Okay, so the gist of this is we're going to take in carbon dioxide and we're going to put it into this cycle, the Calvin cycle. And the carbon is going to be used to make several different formations of carbon in smaller molecules. And what you're going to find out is the ATP that we created in the previous reaction, in the light-dependent reaction, is going to be used to create bonds between carbons. Also, the NADPH is going to be used to create these bonds in the carbons. And what's going to happen is, with the use of ATP and NADPH, carbons are going to go through several cycles around here until 6 carbons are put together. When those 6 carbons are put together, the organic compound, such as glucose, is going to be kicked out. And that's the sugar that we're trying to produce. So the way that the carbon dioxide is used is it's used to be put into the cycle, and then carbon's going to be rearranged, and bonds are going to be made using the energy coming from ATP and NADPH until a 6-carbon sugar is made, and that's going to be kicked out of the cycle. More carbons are going to come in, and that's going to replenish the system with carbons, so more glucose molecules can be kicked out. So carbon dioxide is entering, and we are leaving with our goal of this process, which is a glucose molecule. Today's objectives were to identify the parts of the photosynthetic equation. We did this by examining the scientists and looking at their conclusions and how it fit into the photosynthetic equation. And then we also identified the goals of the light-dependent and light-independent reaction. Remember, the goal of the light-dependent reaction is to use water, sunlight, and convert that into chemical energy and to release off oxygen. The chemical energy that I'm talking about is NADPH and ATP. In the light-independent reaction, our goal is to turn carbon dioxide into a usable high-energy sugar such as glucose. And the way that we did that is by using the chemical energy from the light-dependent reaction and the carbon dioxide from the photosynthetic equation to make that high-energy sugar. This is a very complex topic. I tried to give you a general overview of photosynthesis. If you have any questions, bring them to class. We will go over this in further detail in class. Please make sure you have the notes, and once again, bring any questions to class.